Summer has come to an end and week 1 is upon us, but we are not done auditing yet. Today we have a 10-team Superflex tight end premium that we're going to get into right now.
What's up, Nerd Herd? Dan and Tim back again with another edition of the Dynasty Team Audit Series, and we are on week 1 of the NFL season. It feels like this offseason has gone on forever, but we finally made it. We've got Kansas City and Detroit facing off Thursday night, kicking off, and then Sunday we have a full slate of football to look forward to. That doesn't mean our Dynasty jobs are done, though. We have one more audit to fill in before we get real actual data on these players we've been talking about for 6, 7, 8 months. Like Tim said in our intro, we're changing it up. We got a 10-team Superflex League. This comes from our very own man, TheForerunner. He's a big fan of ours over on our Discord. Very active, and you can join the Discord, actually, by joining the Nerd Herd. We have a great promotion going on right now with our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use the promo code NERDS when signing up. They will instantly deposit match you up to $100 and get you a membership in the Nerd Herd, get you into our Discord, and get you into this video series if you want. So the Forerunner, his league, like I said, it's a 10-team Superflex tight end premium. It's got kind of wacky scoring settings, so let me go through it real fast before we start diving into his team. So it's tight end premium with 6-point passing touchdowns, full point per reception, with the addition of a full point for first downs, whether that's receiving or rushing. You get, for your quarterbacks, 0.1 points per completion. So you want to target those high volume quarterbacks that are really pushing the ball over and over and over again. On touchdowns, you get 2 bonus points for any touchdown that's more than 40 yards. So a 60-yard receiving touchdown, you get 6 for the touchdown, you get 1 for the reception, 4 for the yards, and then 2 bonus. That's like a 13-point play.
I think it's like a 13-point play.
Yeah. So deep touchdowns are very, very, very valuable in this league. There's a 3-point bonus for hitting 300 passing yards for the quarterbacks, and then you also get a 2-point bonus for receivers, tight ends, running backs who surpass 100 yards. So crazy scoring possibilities. I don't think too much of that changes our analysis here, except it puts a higher emphasis on your highly targeted, high volume players.
Right.
Am I right, Tim? Is that kind of how you see the scoring settings?
I mean, I think some of those guys that can have those big time plays, those truly elite guys, it makes a difference for. But yeah, it doesn't overly change a whole lot. But I mean, the one thing I will say is that the 6-point passing touchdown kind of evens the playing field a lot for the more passing quarterback that's not as mobile. So your Joe Burrows are getting a leg up here compared to a Jalen Hurts because, they're pretty close to each other in rankings. But if Burrow's getting 2 extra points in every passing touchdown, it kind of negates a lot of the extra that Jalen Hurts is getting for his rushing touchdowns, because that's a lot of the total points that mobile quarterbacks are getting. So that does even the playing field a little bit across the board. But the other thing too with this league is it is 10 teams and 6 teams make the playoffs. So in a league like this, it's not all about necessarily being great in the regular season. Like if you can get one of those 2 buys, the 1 or 2 seed, and you get a bye, that's a whole week where you can't get eliminated, so it's really important. But you're kind of looking at these teams, and you got to start thinking, like, even from the beginning, if you have a contender, like, what does the week 15, 16, 17 matchups kind of look like? So I think that plays a huge factor as well here.
Yeah, I personally play in a couple leagues that are 10 teams where 6 make the playoffs, and I could attest from experience that the regular season kind of doesn't matter. Right. And the other crazy thing is everybody convinces themselves they're a contender every year.
Right.
So you see the first round draft picks, they really don't accrue value until like right at the trade deadline, when people are like kind of staring, down the barrel of the gun saying like, oh, my team is not making the playoffs, because 6 out of 10 teams make it. You can have a losing record and get into the playoffs. And as we all know, once you're in the playoffs, it's a whole different ballgame. You know,
Absolutely.
you just got to win 4 in a row and you have a title. So
absolutely, making the playoffs is everything because you never know what's going to happen at that point. So.
Trade values in these leagues are much more skewed, but that's why it's good to talk through these things. You know, the great part about Dynasty is it's not very cookie cutter. There's a lot of nuance to these different leagues and formats. But speaking of that, let's get into this roster that we're going to discuss today. As you can see on our Dynasty GM 2.0 tool, we are the #1 ranked Dynasty team. And then even if we switch it into our contender mode, we could see that we are still sitting on top. So we definitely our eyes are on the prize, and you know, this season, unless we win a ship, you know, we're not going to look at it as a successful year.
Sure.
So with Superflex, you always want to start with the quarterback position. We got a very strong room. We got Jalen Hurts, Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, Desmond Ridder. We might even have another starter in Clayton Tune. There's a lot of reports coming out of Arizona that Coach Gannon isn't sure who he's naming as the starter. Colt McCoy was cut, so you have the options of Josh Dobbs or Clayton Tune. We'll see who he goes with. So you could have another starter there. And then you got Aiden O'Connell, who, let's face it, Jimmy Garoppolo, he's one strong gust of wind from another foot injury. And, you know, Aiden, I wouldn't be surprised if Aiden O'Connell starts. You know,
I think I think there's a potential here that he might have 6 starting quarterbacks on this team.
Yeah. But let's reiterate that it's a 10-team league. So,
exactly.
You know, everybody's going to have starting quarterbacks. The quarterback value is slightly suppressed, but I like that when they set this league up, they did the 6 points per touchdown. They did the bonus points for passing yards and pass attempts, and it kind of brings the quarterback position value closer to that of a 12-team Superflex league.
Right, absolutely. And that 300-yard, it's an extra 2 points, right, for a 300-yard. That'll come into play for certain quarterbacks too. Because I mean, like Mahomes last year had 10 games of 300 yards or more, where a guy like Jalen Hurts only had 4 games of 300 yards or more. So it's only an extra 2 on the game. But I mean, when games can come down to, you know, fractional points, 2 points is a lot for some of these guys.
Yeah, especially like in the playoffs, you know, it's
absolutely
anything can happen. All right, so next we'll go into the running back room, where we start off with Bijan Robinson. We have Breece Hall, Derrick Henry, Zamir White, Ezekiel Elliott, Isaiah Spiller, Ty Chandler, Jerome Ford, Latavius Murray, and then Rico Dwaddle. So the running back room has I would say some questions. I would say it's a strong room, but there's definitely
absolutely
a lot of question marks when you're looking at this. One thing I like to see is Breece Hall as a player. You know, there's been reports today that Dalvin Cook and him are going to split carries week 1, which shouldn't really surprise anybody given the extent of his injury. But Breece Hall down the stretch in the playoffs is going to win a lot of people leagues this year. He'll be
absolutely
more than a year removed from his injury, and we saw such a small sample size of efficiency last year when he started his rookie campaign that it's going to be so nice to see him build and grow on that. And then you add Aaron Rodgers and there being an actual vertical passing threat to this offense. I think Breece Hall is going to become a true league winner. However, the first 4 to 5 weeks might be a little bit iffy for Breece Hall managers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you just got to kind of weather the storm on this one. You got to remember it hasn't even been a full year since he tore that ACL. The fact that he's going to even be in on Monday Night Football next week against the Bills, that's a positive sign. You want to see that. I mean, you have him and Javonte Williams, I believe, are both going to be back the first week of the year, and it's not always typical that we see that guys get back that quickly from ACL injuries. So take your time with it, let him come back to health, and then really hope that the Jets are going to, you know, start to lean on him down the stretch, because they didn't bring in Dalvin Cook for no reason. You know, you don't spend that money to just bring in Dalvin Cook so he sits on the bench. They're going to try to split this for a while to slowly bring Breece Hall up to speed and hopefully have him ready to go, you know, the last few weeks of the year when the games are the most important prior to the playoffs. So you just got to kind of weather that storm. Derrick Henry on here is one that I really love, especially in a format like this where he's getting to play the Houston Texans twice down the stretch. So we've kind of talked about that a couple times before on some of our audit series. So he's a really good one to hold. But again, Derrick Henry tons and tons of wear on the tires. He's been run a lot. So by the time we get to the end of the year, is Tyjae Spears starting to take over there? Does Henry have any injuries? So the thing with this running back room for our guy is after Bijan, Brees, and Henry, it's a lot of, kind of whatever guys. And so you probably want to go out and try to find yourself some depth here because running back is the most volatile position. And you're probably going to run into an injury once or twice throughout the year.
Yep, agreed. So moving on to wide receivers, we have T. Higgins, Devonta Smith, DJ Moore, Christian Watson, Amari Cooper, Christian Kirk, Rashee Rice, John Mechie, Joshua Palmer, and Darius Slayton. Now, Tim, let me ask you, when you see a room like this, what is your first impression of the talent here? For sure.
Really solid room, very deep, but doesn't have a true star in the room. I think you're starting guys the guys that are in bold here are the starting players in his roster right now. So T. Higgins, Devonta Smith, DJ Moore, Amari Cooper, Christian Kirk, all really good options. Even Christian Watson kind of in the middle there. If he's starting to connect with Jordan Love this year, could be a good option for you. But in this league where we kind of talked about all those bonus points, finding a guy that can be, 40, 50-yard touchdown reception kind of guy is going to be a huge bonus to those big-time plays. So it's not that any of these guys are bad. It's just with the current scoring format, it really does lend to those elite-type players being worth just a smidge more. And so with all of these really good players on the roster, you may be able to package one and upgrade to get yourself a true premier guy, which is kind of the one thing that this room is missing.
Yeah, in 10-team leagues, I would say depth is less of a priority, and you definitely want to focus more on that top-end talent.
Exactly.
When building these rosters. Finally, we have our tight ends. This room might be the one with the most work that needs to be done. Sam Laporta, who I love, and I can't wait to see him on Thursday night, on the field in live action. But he is still a rookie tight end. It's going to be very hard for him to rely on him, especially in a tight end premium league where the tight end is so important. Pat Freiermuth is another tight end that I love this year, but he's also, at the moment, not a needle mover. I could easily see him having a breakout season, Kenny Pickett in the second year of the Pittsburgh offense. But you got to remember, we still have second-year George Pickens. You have Deontay Johnson, who's one of the best, most underrated receivers in the league. And it's a team that plays really good defense and tries to control the ball. So relying on Pat Freiermuth this year might be, a little tricky.
Right.
K-Dot and Tyler Higbee, Jelani Woods. Jelani Woods, actually, is he done for the year? Or I know he's on the IR.
I think he's on the IR, but I'm not sure if it's been for the whole year yet.
Yeah. Either way, you should not be relying on Jelani Woods
right.
in a 10-team league.
Exactly.
So when I look over this roster, Tim, my first focus is we need to work on improving this tight end room because tight end is also the type of thing that is going to really push you over the top when you're in your semifinals and championship games because guess what? You're probably playing the Travis Kelce team in one of those games.
Exactly.
You're probably playing the TJ Hawkinson, George Kittle team in one of those games. So, you have to bring your own ammo to the fight and be able to, go blow for blow with those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this room it's not that it's unstartable. I mean, Freiermuth can get you through part of the year, but I mean, when you get to those playoff weeks, you are at such a disadvantage if that's who you're starting versus the guys like Kelce, Andrews, Kittle when healthy, Waller, and Hawkinson. So, but I mean, exactly like Dan was saying, I mean, Laporta, I think I'm really excited about his career too, but it takes tight ends a while to become those guys. I mean, even Hawkinson, we just talked about, it was year 4 last year when he finally kind of really broke out to being one of those kind of more elite premier tight ends. So it's going to take a while, and I don't expect Laporta to be there right away this year. So if we're contending this year, we're kind of relying on probably Freiermuth and Higbee out of this room.
Yep. And then finally, just to wrap it up from a dynasty aspect, our draft capital, we have a pair of 24 firsts, and then it looks like down the board we hold most of our own picks. So not much extra there, but that 124 first on top is going to come in handy because the probably one of the best, my most favorite part about the GM tool is it lays your whole league out on this bar graph, and it lets you kind of look right away at who you should be talking to and communicating with when thinking of trades. And my eye goes to always the last place team and trying to kind of take a look at their roster and figure out what is their mindset? What are they trying to get out of this season? What direction is their dynasty going in? And we have this Gangrene team in last place, and I will point out something that's going to very quickly make it apparent what Gangrene is after. If we go down here to the draft picks section, we will see that Mr. Green here has not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but actually, I'm sorry, 4.
But 4.
Stop me at 4. He has 4 2024 first-round draft picks, which in a 10-team league is 40% of the first round.
Exactly.
You know, and I know college football week 1 just ended. You know, we have the Colorado Buffaloes with the big upset win over TCU. We have a lot of the big-name quarterbacks just continuing what we saw last year. We have a lot of hype building for this 2024 class already. So this is kind of the perfect time for you to take those extra 24 first that, let's be honest, those are going to be picks 7, 8, 9, 10 in next year's rookie draft.
Yeah.
Which is still going to get you a very good player next year.
Absolutely.
But too many people play Dynasty looking forward to the rookies, looking forward to the next good player that they're going to get, and they sacrifice the championship in order to do that.
Right.
I think Tim, you said it a couple episodes ago, like, you know, are you going to sacrifice winning a championship to get the opportunity to draft Devon Achane at the end of the first round?
Never. I mean, never, ever, ever. We've said it. Maybe we make it our slogan of the audit that banners fly forever. That is the goal here. And whether it's I earned that by building through the draft or I made trades to get those guys, if at the end of the day you're putting a ring on your finger, that is what matters. So it's not as much about trying to build it up and, you know, hold on to those draft picks that for our guy here are probably going to be 2 late round picks in the first round next year. It's about going out and trying to be a contender and winning it this year. So while it's awesome to have 2 2024 firsts, it's also awesome to hang a banner and to be able to brag about being a champion. So I'm totally willing to move either of those 2024 firsts on our team to make sure that we have the pieces to go out and win one this year.
Yeah, so now let's look at some pieces that we can grab off this roster to put our roster over the top. First place we're going to stop is the tight end room because we see a name right away that Tim mentioned when talking about contending tight ends. Tim, why don't you talk about the framework of possibly a Darren Waller trade to help this team?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Darren Waller's already 31 years old. He's had an injury history. There's plenty of reasons why you could be skeptical about a guy like Waller. But also, he's had an unbelievable camp in New York. Now he's with the Giants. He looks like he's the top target there from that passing offense because who's their number 1 wide receiver? I mean, like, who's their number 2 wide receiver? It is just a room of, like, wide receiver 3s. So Darren Waller is going to be your go-to guy in that offense. This is a league where you get extra points for first downs. So every 3rd and 4 yards and beyond, they're going to be looking for Waller beyond the sticks. He's going to be a red zone target, and the guy has proven it before by being a top 3 tight end in this league already. So when you look at a guy like Gangrene 15 here, who's already accumulated 4 first-round picks, and he has a 31-year-old tight end, I think we can kind of see what he's trying to do. He's trying to break it down and rebuild, and we need a tight end really bad. So this is about the most cut and dry fit for each other that you could ever see in a trade. So Waller is going to be a guy that we should absolutely be aiming for here.
Yeah. And now let's talk about the value of those first-round draft picks.
Sure.
Because this is why it's important to communicate with fellow owners in your league and get a feel for what they're thinking. Because, if Gangrene here, if he's really in tune with the way too early pre-draft process, he knows about his Marvin Harrison Jr.'s, he knows about Drake May, Caleb Williams, Brock Bowers, Blake Corum, Travion Henderson, Malik Neighbors, Donovan Edwards, like
Rocket Sanders. Yeah.
Tim, I can go on forever with this class, and we will. Let's pump the brakes.
We will. Don't worry.
Trust us. Plenty of content coming down the pipeline. But if he is a person that's in tune with this 24 class, those firsts might be very valuable to him.
Yeah.
And we might be able to squeeze a little bit more out of him than just simply Darren Waller.
Absolutely.
Now,
yeah, I mean,
I'll just say, in the reverse, he could pay no attention to college football whatsoever. And
Sure.
he could just be picking up first-round draft picks.
Yep.
In which case, maybe Darren Waller for a first doesn't seem like an ideal move for him. But that's why we always say, communicate with your league mates and,
right.
Try to find a plan that works for both people.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I would say Waller and a third from his end for the first is probably pretty good value. But as long as we're here, we might as well look around the roster and see, like, is there anything we could package in here with Waller that makes it, a deal where we could be like, hey, we'll give you 2 first-rounders. You're going to have 60% of the first round in the draft next year. And Dan has scrolled up here, and there's a name at the top of the running back list that is one that everyone is avoiding right now. Everybody's really scared of, but it's Jonathan Taylor, right? And Jonathan Taylor is still, 2 years ago was the number 1 asset in fantasy football. He was the number 1 pick in redraft leagues last year. This is not some guy that's just, an average running back. This is a league-winning style running back. Yes, he's out the first 4 weeks of the year this year. Yes, there's major contract disputes going on. But as we've talked about already here, all we got to do is get to the playoffs. All we got to do is get to weeks 15, 16, 17, and then we need to have the best roster that we can put out there. If this owner is scared about what's going on with Taylor and willing to move him, you should absolutely be talking about trying to acquire him, because if he returns by the end of the year, he could be a league winner for you in this league. Being able to have him in a flex spot or a starting role is a cheat code if he goes back to form in being who Jonathan Taylor was. So it's worth the risk. Now, we're not going to overpay. We're not going to pay up some incredible value for Jonathan Taylor that he was worth 3 months ago. We're going to pay what his value is right now. And so if I can package something together to get Taylor and Waller on my team, I'm all about it.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the point where I would take those 224 firsts. I would go post Gangrene and say, like, listen, Waller, Jonathan Taylor, I have these 2 firsts. Let's talk it out. Let's find, the pieces that can interlock to make this complete. We've talked about the depth of the quarterback room for Forerunner here. So maybe you take a Clayton Tune, that maybe you take an Aiden O'Connell,
right?
Or we talked about the depth of the wide receiver room, because the other thing to think about is, I didn't mention this before, but he starts 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and 2 flex.
Right.
So if we go back to his current starting roster, we could see that he's starting 5 wide receivers, and 2 running backs.
And that makes sense with the way his current setup is, and with Breece Hall having the injury stuff, and you would start 5 of these wide receivers. But what's funny is if you look at the wide receivers he has listed, the ones that are in bold down here, there's a couple names on here, Christian Watson, Rashee Rice, and John Mechie, who are all younger players that could interest Gangrene 15 as well. So you could come to him and you could say, look, I'll give you Rashee Rice, 2 first-round picks, and I want Taylor and Waller, and you see what happens, because he could value a guy like that. You got to remember, too, and we talked about this in one of our recent audits, these late-end first-round picks, they're going to be guys like in this 2023 draft, we were looking at guys like Devon Achane, Dalton Kincaid, people of those caliber. Would you rather have Dalton Kincaid going into this year or Darren Waller going into this year when you're a competing team? You're going to want Waller. So don't get so caught up with, I'm giving up a young wide receiver and 2 first-round picks for a 31-year-old tight end and a guy who I don't know if he's playing this year. No, these are the moves you have to make to get yourself over the top sometimes.
Yep. And the other reason I wanted to mention the starting lineup requirements is because you see how we're starting 5 wide receivers right now. Mm-hmm. Let's go back up to that back room. Let's put Jonathan Taylor in this running back room in week 14. You are now starting 4 running backs. You are starting Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, Derrick Henry, and Breece Hall, which means that's 2 less flex you're starting out of wide receivers.
Right.
So that means you don't even need a Christian Kirk playing for your team. You don't even need they're all really good wide receivers. I'd love to have them on any of my teams. But that just goes to show the point that, hey, maybe you include a Christian Kirk in this trade. you know, because Christian Kirk is just wide receiver depth for you right now. He's not entering your starting lineup when you're in the playoffs unless he has a very, you know, plus type of matchup.
Right,
but that's so far down the road. We don't know how defenses and corners are going to mature, so that's way too early to think about. But you got to think of it as kind of like a puzzle. You know, what's the best way to get all the pieces to fit together to give you the most optimal lineup when you get to your championship in week 17?
You don't need to have as much depth here. You just want to have those elite guys. So there's one more name I want to talk about really quick, Dan, before we get out of here, and it's one more trade target. So if things don't work out with Gangrene 15, and I think you should be aiming at Waller no matter what, and trying to make it Waller and Taylor. But if he's skeptical and doesn't really want to move Jonathan Taylor, I can understand that. Still go after Waller, but the number 9 team in this league, Pura Vida, I think is the name. When we go down his roster here, we look at this wide receiver room that's in here specifically. We'll start there because that's the fun part to start. Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Chris Olave, Zay Flowers, Jonathan Mingo, Calvin Ridley, Van Jefferson, and then Rashid Shaheed and Trey Palmer and Paris Campbell. So, but the top of that is just so stacked. But then we look at the rest of his roster. The running backs are a huge question mark with just James Cook, Alexander Mattison, Antonio Gibson as his starters, and then a lot of guys that are kind of, you know, just a guys. And his quarterback room, we start off with Tua, but then it's Will Levis, Baker Mayfield, Trey Lance. So this guy's going to struggle this year. And if he's seeing that and he understands, hey, I might not be a top contender this year, maybe I should try to move away from some of my older players. Well, the second receiver that's on this list, Tyreek Hill, is getting older. He's not, you know, a spring chicken anymore, but he's like the headline guy when you were reading off those special cases of extra points that you can get. 40-yard touchdowns, like the first name that comes to my head is Tyreek Hill. So if you can go out and find a guy like Tyreek Hill and make him the premier guy on your wide receiver room, you should absolutely be looking at that. So if you went and you made the move for Waller with one of the firsts, come back with your other first and tie it in with one of your receivers that are on your team and upgrade to Tyreek Hill. I think that could be an enormous, enormous leg up on this roster. There's people out there that even are taking Tyreek Hill in redrafts above Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase this year. Like, he is in that tier when we're talking about 1 year, you know, just the 2023 season.
Yep, agreed. All right, so Forerunner gave you a lot of advice. Listen, you got to act fast. The NFL season is here. We have real, actual football that means something on Thursday night. I personally cannot wait to see all these players on the field. I cannot wait to be wrong about everything I talked about all summer.
That's what always happens.
It always happens. Tim, do you have any final thoughts before we sign out here today?
No, just I'm so excited, guys. Like, this is week 1 NFL season. We've been talking ad nauseum since, you know, the season ended last year. Because, I mean, we watch the playoffs and everything, but when we're talking about fantasy, we're talking about up to like week 17. So this has been a long, long time coming, and I'm just really excited to watch some actual real NFL football this weekend and on Thursday night.
Me too. All right, For Herd, thanks for checking us out. Tim and I will continue the series. It'll be more interesting when we're in season. We can actually live react to players as they go up in value, go down in value, injuries. So stay tuned to the Dynasty Team Audit. And remember, if you want to be featured in season, probably one of the most important times for Dynasty, you can sign up for the Nerd Herd with our sponsors, Underdog Fantasy. Use the promo code NERDS when signing up. They will instantly match your deposit up to $100. Get you a Nerd Herd membership and get you as a possible member of our Dynasty Team Audit Series. This is Dan signing out. This is Tim signing out. You guys have a good one and enjoy week 1 of action.
Take it easy, everyone.